Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he packed his geological equipment into his backpack. The sun was getting lower in the sky over New Montana's western mountains. He had spent the whole day taking rock samples and checking mineral deposits in this remote area. His job as a surveyor was usually quiet and peaceful. Most days he saw nothing but rocks, trees, and the occasional wild animal. He was about to start his hike back to base camp when a bright flash lit up the evening sky. Jake looked up and saw what looked like a falling star streaking across the darkening heavens. But this was different from normal meteors he had seen before. The object was moving too slowly and seemed to be changing direction slightly as it fell. The burning object crashed into the forest about 2 miles from where Jake stood. The impact shook the ground under his feet and sent a column of smoke rising above the treetops. Jake grabbed his emergency radio and tried to contact the Abbey colonial base. Static filled the airwaves. The mountainous terrain often blocked radio signals in this area. Jake made a quick decision. As a licensed first responder, he was trained to help in emergencies. He shouldered his pack and started hiking toward the crash site. The terrain was rough with thick trees and rocky slopes, but Jake knew these mountains well. He had been surveying this region for 3 years. It took him almost an hour to reach the crash site. When he arrived, Jake stopped and stared in amazement. This was definitely not a meteor. A small metallic pod about the size of a car had carved a deep groove in the earth where it had skidded to a stop. The hull was made of some kind of silver metal that Jake had never seen before. Strange symbols were carved along its sides. Steam rose from the damaged craft. Jake approached carefully, looking for any signs of danger. One side of the pod had cracked open, revealing a dark interior. Jake pulled out his flashlight and peered inside. His heart nearly stopped. There was someone inside the crashed vessel. A person lay unconscious among twisted metal and sparking electronics. But as Jake looked closer, he realized this was not exactly a person like him. The figure was female and roughly human-shaped, but her skin was a pale blue color like winter sky. Her hair was silver and seemed to shimmer even in the dim light of his flashlight. She was smaller than most humans, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with delicate features and pointed ears. She wore a form-fitting suit that looked like it might be some kind of space gear, though parts of it were torn and damaged. Jake climbed into the pod carefully, trying not to cut himself on the sharp metal edges. He checked for a pulse at the girl's neck. Her skin felt cool, but he could feel a steady heartbeat. She was breathing, though it seemed shallow and fast. The girl's eyes suddenly opened. They were large and violet-colored, unlike anything Jake had ever seen. She looked at him with fear and confusion. She tried to speak, but the words were in a language Jake did not understand. The sounds were musical but completely foreign. Jake held up his hands to show he meant no harm. He spoke slowly and clearly. "It's okay. I'm here to help you. You were in a crash. Are you hurt?" The girl continued speaking in her strange language. She seemed to be getting more upset. Then she reached for a small device attached to her damaged suit. She pressed it, and suddenly Jake could understand her words, though they sounded oddly translated. "Where am I? Who are you? Are you one of them?" she asked in a voice filled with panic. "I'm Jake Morrison. You're on New Montana. I saw your ship crash and came to help. Who are them?" The girl tried to sit up but winced in pain. Her left arm appeared to be injured. "The slavers, the Krathos, they were chasing me. My ship was damaged and I had to use the escape pod." Jake helped her sit up carefully. "You're safe now. There's no one else here but me. Can you tell me your name?" "I am Zara of the Veltar. I was fleeing when my vessel was struck by their weapons." She looked around the damaged pod. "My ship's systems are dead. I cannot call for help." Jake pulled out his scanner and checked the area. Night was falling fast, and the temperature was already dropping. In these mountains, it would get very cold before morning. The girl's thin suit would not protect her from the harsh conditions. "We need to get you out of here," Jake said. "I have a camp set up about a mile away. You need medical attention and shelter." Zara tried to stand, but her legs were shaky. Jake supported her weight and helped her climb out of the wrecked pod. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile. The cold mountain air made her shiver immediately. Jake's camp was basic, but functional. He had a small tent, sleeping bag, portable heater, and emergency medical supplies. He helped Zara sit by the fire he quickly built and examined her injuries. Her arm was badly bruised, but probably not broken. She had several small cuts and scrapes, but nothing that looked serious. As the night grew colder, Zara's shivering became worse. Jake could see she was struggling with the temperature. Her species was obviously not adapted for cold weather. He made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Jake unzipped his thermal sleeping bag and held it out to her. "Here. You need this more than I do. It will keep you warm tonight." Zara stared at the sleeping bag, then at Jake, then back at the bag. Her violet eyes grew wide with what looked like complete shock and terror. She began speaking rapidly in her own language, her voice rising in pitch. The translation device struggled to keep up with her rapid speech. Jake had no idea that he had just accidentally proposed marriage. Jake stood there holding his sleeping bag while Zara continued speaking rapidly in her alien language. Her translation device kept making strange beeping sounds as it tried to process her words. Finally, some broken phrases came through in English. Sanctuary, bonding ritual, life warmth sharing, sacred joining ceremony, cannot accept, not ready for eternal binding. Jake was completely confused. He lowered the sleeping bag and looked at the shivering alien girl. "I don't understand. It's just a sleeping bag? You're cold, and it's going to get much colder tonight. I have an emergency blanket I can use." Zara backed away from him, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. The translation device finally seemed to stabilize, and her words came through more clearly. "You offer your rest sanctuary to an unmarked female. In my culture, this is the most sacred of bonding declarations. Only life mates share warmth sleep. You are either claiming me as your eternal partner or declaring hostile ownership. Intentions." Jake's mouth dropped open. He had never heard of anything so complicated about a simple act of kindness. No, I'm not trying to marry you or claim you or anything like that. I'm just trying to help. You're going to freeze to death if you don't stay warm." But his words only seemed to make things worse. The translation device was turning his simple explanation into confusing concepts that Zara's culture had no context for. Help without bonding requirements? Warmth sharing without life debt creation? "This is unknown to Veltar understanding," Zara said, her voice shaking from both cold and confusion. Jake sat down on a rock near the fire and tried to think of how to explain human nature to someone from another world. "Look, where I come from, when someone is in trouble, we help them. We don't expect anything back. We just do it because it's the right thing to do." Zara stared at him like he had grown a second head. Right thing to do. This concept does not translate properly. In Veltar society, all actions have social contracts. All assistance creates debt obligations. All sharing of personal resources establishes hierarchy relationships. The cold mountain wind picked up, and Zara's shivering became violent. Jake could see her lips were turning blue. Whatever cultural confusion was happening here, she was going to die from exposure if something didn't change soon. "Okay, forget about the cultural stuff for now," Jake said firmly. "You are going to die if you don't get warm. I don't care what it means in your culture. I'm not going to let you freeze." He spread his sleeping bag on the ground next to the fire and gestured for her to use it. "This is not a marriage proposal. This is not me claiming ownership. This is me trying to keep you alive until morning. We can figure out the cultural problems later." Zara looked at the sleeping bag, then at Jake's determined face. She could feel her body temperature dropping dangerously low. Her species needed much warmer conditions than humans to survive. She had already been weakened by her injuries and the crash. Reluctantly, she moved toward the sleeping bag. "If I accept your warmth sanctuary offering, what will be your expectations? Of me?" "My only expectation is that you don't die," Jake said. He was already unpacking his emergency blanket and some extra clothes to keep himself warm. "In the morning, we'll figure out how to get you help." Zara carefully climbed into the sleeping bag. The warmth was immediate and wonderful. Her shivering began to slow down. But her mind was still racing with confusion about Jake's motivations. "In my experience," she said quietly, "powerful beings who offer aid always expect something valuable in return. The slavers who captured my ship offered protection in exchange for servitude. What makes you different?" Jake was wrapping himself in his emergency blanket by the fire. The metallic material was not nearly as warm as his sleeping bag, but it would keep him alive through the night. "I guess the difference is that I'm not powerful. I'm just a guy who studies rocks for a living. I saw someone who needed help and decided to help them. That's all." Zara watched him shiver as he arranged his makeshift bedding. "You gave me your superior warmth shelter and kept the inferior one for yourself. This action contradicts all logic of self-preservation." "Maybe," Jake said, poking at the fire to build it up higher. "But I'm bigger than you and probably handle cold better. Besides, you're hurt and I'm not. It just makes sense." "Makes sense," Zara repeated slowly. "Human logic is very strange." They sat in silence for a while, both staring at the fire. Jake was trying to understand how offering a sleeping bag could be seen as a marriage proposal. Zara was trying to understand how someone could help a stranger without wanting anything in return. "Jake Morrison," Zara said finally, "if your assistance does not create bonding obligations and you seek no payment or servitude, then what do you gain from helping me?" Jake thought about this for a moment. "I guess I gain the knowledge that I did the right thing. Where I come from, we have a saying, 'Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.' It means treat other people the way you would want to be treated. So if you were injured and cold on my world, you would want someone to help you?" "Of course I would. Even a stranger? Even someone from a different species?" "Especially then," Jake said. "Being alone and scared in a strange place is the worst. Time to not have anyone who cares." Zara was quiet for a long time. The warmth of the sleeping bag was making her drowsy, but her mind was still processing everything Jake had told her. Her species had never encountered beings who helped others without clear social contracts or payment arrangements. "The Krathos who were chasing me," she said softly, "they help no one without expecting slavery in return. The traders who visit my world offer aid only for profitable exchanges. Even among my own people, assistance creates social debts that must be repaid." "That sounds like a hard way to live," Jake said. "It is predictable, safe. Everyone knows what is expected." Zara paused, "But also cold. Not temperature cold, but heart cold." Jake nodded. "I think I understand. You're not used to people being nice just to be nice." "Nice just to be nice," Zara repeated the phrase. "This is a human concept?" "Pretty much, yeah." As the night grew deeper, Zara finally began to relax. The combination of warmth, safety, and Jake's calm presence was helping her body recover from the trauma of the crash. But just as she was beginning to trust that maybe humans were different from the other species she had encountered, a new sound reached her ears. The distant hum of engines approaching through the mountain air. Zara's eyes snapped open wide with terror. "They found me!" The sound of engines grew louder in the dark mountain air. Zara sat up quickly in the sleeping bag, her face filled with fear. Jake could see the terror in her violet eyes as she looked toward the sky. "Those are Krathos pursuit craft," Zara whispered. "They have found my energy signature. We must run or they will capture both of us." Jake stood up and listened to the approaching sound. He could see lights moving through the darkness, getting closer to their position. How many of them are there? Usually? A hunting pack contains 4 to 6 warriors. They are large, strong, and well-armed. They capture rare beings to sell to the highest bidders across the galaxy. Zara struggled to get out of the sleeping bag. I will not let them take you because of my presence here. Nobody's taking anybody, Jake said firmly. He was already moving around the campsite, gathering his equipment. How tough are these Krathos things? Very tough. Their skin is like armor, and they carry energy weapons that can stun or kill. Jake, Morrison, you must leave me and save yourself. You have shown me more kindness than any being in my life. I cannot let you suffer for my sake. Jake stopped packing and looked at her. Did you not understand anything we talked about tonight? I don't abandon people who need help. We're both getting out of this. He pulled out his geological equipment and started selecting items that might be useful. His rock hammers were too small to be effective weapons, but he had something better. As a surveyor, he carried mining charges for clearing rock samples. The small explosive devices were designed to break apart stone formations, but they might work against alien slavers too. I have an emergency beacon that calls for help from the Colonial Defense Force, Jake said as he stuffed the mining charges into his pockets. But it takes time for them to respond. We need to stay alive and stay free until they get here. The alien ship was getting closer now. Jake could make out its shape against the stars. It was larger than Zara's escape pod and looked much more dangerous. Weapon ports glowed along its sides. Jake, you do not understand. The Krathos are professional hunters. They have tracking equipment and combat experience. You are just a rock-studying human. This is not a fair fight. Jake activated his emergency beacon and clipped it to his belt. You're right, it's not fair. They don't know this terrain like I do. He shouldered his pack and helped Zara to her feet. Can you walk? Yes, but where can we go? They will scan the entire area. I know a place. There's a network of caves about half a mile from here. The rock contains metal deposits that might interfere with their scanners. Jake kicked dirt over their fire to hide the light. Stay close to me and step where I step. They began moving through the dark forest. Jake used his knowledge of the mountain paths to guide them quickly over the rough terrain. Zara was still weak from her injuries, but she kept up without complaining. Behind them, the alien ship landed near Jake's campsite with a thunderous noise that echoed through the mountains. Jake could hear harsh voices speaking in a guttural language. Lights began sweeping through the trees as the Krathos started their search. Their voices sounded angry when they found the abandoned campsite. They know we were there, Zara whispered as they climbed over a rocky ridge. Good. Let them waste time looking in the wrong place. Jake helped her down the other side of the rocks. The cave entrance is just ahead. The cave system Jake remembered was actually an old mining tunnel from the early colonial days. The entrance was hidden behind thick bushes and would be hard to spot from the air. More importantly, the tunnels went deep into the mountain where scanners would have trouble penetrating. They had just reached the cave entrance when bright lights suddenly blazed down on them from above. A second Krathos ship had been circling silently and had spotted their movement. There they are! A deep voice roared from speakers on the ship. The female is ours by right of capture. Surrender the Veltar and you will not be harmed, human. Jake pushed Zara toward the cave entrance. Get inside. Go as deep as you can. What about you? Zara asked. I'm buying us some time. Jake pulled out one of his mining charges and set it for a delayed explosion. These guys want to play rough. Let's see how they handle a rock slide. The Krathos ship was hovering low, trying to land near the cave entrance. Jake could see the armored figures inside preparing to jump out. He threw the mining charge at a rocky overhang above the ship and dove for cover. The explosion was much larger than he expected. Tons of rock crashed down on the alien ship, damaging its engines and forcing it to retreat. Jake heard angry roars from the Krathos as their ship limped away trailing smoke. But the noise had attracted the other search parties. Jake could see lights moving through the forest toward their position. He ran into the cave where Zara was. "Waiting! That was incredible," she said, staring at him with amazement. "You damaged their ship with primitive explosives." "Primitive explosives work just fine if you know how to use them," Jake said. He pulled out his flashlight and started leading her deeper into the tunnel system. "The trick is not to fight fair when the other guy has better weapons." They moved quickly through the abandoned mining tunnels. Jake's flashlight showed old support beams and rusted equipment left behind by the original miners. The tunnels split and branched in multiple directions, creating a maze that would be confusing to follow. Behind them, they could hear the Krathos entering the cave system. Their heavy footsteps echoed off the stone walls. The aliens were shouting to each other in their harsh language, obviously frustrated by the difficult terrain. "This way," Jake whispered, leading Zara down a side tunnel that sloped upward. "This connects to an old ventilation shaft that comes out on the other side of the mountain." "Why are you doing this?" Zara asked as they climbed through the narrow passage. "You could have hidden and let them take me. You would have been safe." Jake stopped and looked back at her. "Because that's not who I am. And it's not who humans are. We don't abandon friends." "Friends," Zara repeated softly. "You consider me a friend even though we just met? You needed help, and I helped you. That makes us friends in my book." They could hear the Krathos getting closer behind them. The aliens had brought some kind of tracking equipment that was helping them follow the trail. Jake realized they weren't going to make it to the ventilation shaft in time. He made another quick decision. Jake pulled out his remaining mining charges and started setting them along the tunnel walls. "What are you doing now?" Zara asked. "Making sure they can't follow us." Jake set the last charge and grabbed Zara's hand. "Run!" They sprinted up the tunnel as fast as they could go. Behind them, Jake's charges exploded in sequence, bringing down sections of the tunnel roof. The passage filled with dust and debris, blocking the way for their pursuers. When they finally emerged from the ventilation shaft on the far side of the mountain, both Jake and Zara were exhausted. They could hear the frustrated roars of the Krathos echoing from the collapsed tunnels below. "Your emergency beacon," Zara gasped, trying to catch her breath. "How long until help arrives?" Jake checked his device. "Should be any minute now. Colonial. Defense responds fast to emergency calls in this sector." As if summoned by his words, the sound of human aircraft engines filled the air. 3 colonial patrol ships swept over the mountain, their searchlights illuminating the area. The Krathos ship that had been damaged earlier was trying to escape, but the human ships quickly surrounded it. Jake activated his beacon's homing signal to guide the rescue ships to their location. Within minutes, one of the patrol craft landed. Near their position, armed colonial marines jumped out, securing the area. "This is Commander Hayes," the patrol leader said as he approached Jake and Zara. "We received your emergency signal. Are you both injured?" "We're okay," Jake replied. "But those alien ships were chasing her. They're some kind of slavers." Commander Hayes looked at Zara with surprise. This was clearly the first time he had seen a member of her species. "Ma'am, are you in need of medical attention?" Zara looked at Jake, then at the human soldiers who had come to help them. She was beginning to understand that Jake's kindness was not unique among his people. "I am..." "Well, thanks to Jake Morrison," she said. "Your species is very unusual," Commander Hayes smiled. "Yeah, we get that a lot." 3 days after the rescue, Jake found himself sitting in a conference room at the New Montana Colonial Administration building. He was still trying to understand how offering someone his sleeping bag had led to him being in the middle of interspecies diplomatic negotiations. Dr. Lisa Park, the colony's lead xenobiologist, sat across from him reviewing her notes. Commander Hayes was pacing by the window, occasionally glancing at his communication device. Zara sat next to Jake, looking much healthier after receiving proper medical care. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Dr. Park said, adjusting her glasses. "When you offered Zara your sleeping bag, She interpreted it as a marriage proposal according to Veltar culture? That's what she tells me, Jake replied. I was just trying to keep her from freezing to death. And now her people are sending a diplomatic ship to deal with what they think is either a wedding or a kidnapping situation? Apparently so. Commander Hayes stopped pacing and looked at them. The Veltar vessel will arrive in about 6 hours. This is going to be the first official contact between our species. No pressure or anything, but how this goes could affect relations between our peoples for generations. Jake ran his hand through his hair. All I did was offer her a sleeping bag. Zara spoke up quietly. In my culture, the sharing of personal rest space is the most sacred form of bonding declaration. When I sent my distress signal to my people, I told them that a human male had performed the sanctuary sharing ritual with me. What exactly did you tell them? Dr. Park asked. I said that Jake Morrison of the human colony had claimed bonding rights through Warmth Sanctuary offering, and that I required immediate family intervention to resolve the situation. Commander Hayes sat down heavily in his chair. So they think Jake either wants to marry you or has kidnapped you for marriage purposes. Yes. My father, High Arbiter Velkan, is leading the delegation. He is not known for his patience with beings who threaten his daughter. Jake looked at Zara with concern. Is he going to try to arrest me or challenge me to combat or something? Possibly both, Zara admitted. Veltar bonding law is very complex. If he believes you made a legitimate bonding claim, he will want to negotiate the terms. If he believes you made a false claim to harm me, he will want to punish you severely, Doctor. Park leaned forward with interest. Can you explain more about how bonding works in your culture? Maybe we can find a way to resolve this misunderstanding. Zara thought for a moment. Among the Veltar, all social relationships are governed by formal contracts and obligations. When two people decide to bond as life partners, there are specific rituals that must be performed. The sanctuary sharing ritual is the most important because it represents the willingness to share all resources and protection for life. But Jake was just being kind, Dr. Park said. He saw you were cold and gave you something to keep warm. There was no romantic intention. This is what confuses me about humans, Zara replied. In my experience, kindness always comes with expectations. The slavers who captured me offered food and shelter, but expected servitude in return. Traders offer assistance, but demand payment. Even among my own people, help creates debts that must be repaid. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Look, I get that your culture is different, but where I come from, helping people is just what you do. You don't keep score or expect anything back. And that's exactly what makes this situation so complicated, Commander Hayes said. The Veltar delegation is going to have a very hard time believing that Jake's actions were purely altruistic. Dr. Park pulled up some information on her tablet. I've been researching what little we know about Veltar society from the galactic databases. They appear to be a highly structured civilization with very formal social rules. Acts of generosity, without clear contractual obligations, are apparently unknown in their culture. So how do we convince her father that I'm not trying to kidnap or marry his daughter? Jake asked. Before anyone could answer, Commander Hayes's communication device buzzed. He checked the message and looked up grimly. The Veltar ship has arrived? Early. They're requesting immediate permission to land. Within an hour, a sleek silver spacecraft had landed at the colonial spaceport. Jake watched through the conference room window as a delegation of tall, elegant beings emerged from the ship. They all had the same pale blue skin and silver hair as Zara, but they wore elaborate robes and carried themselves with obvious authority. The leader of the group was clearly Zara's father. He was taller than the others, and his robes were decorated, with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change color in the light. His face showed the same delicate features as Zara, but his expression was stern and forbidding. High Arbiter Velkan, Zara said softly as she watched her father approach the building. He does not look pleased. Great, Jake muttered. This should go well. The formal meeting took place in the colony's main conference hall. High Arbiter. Velkan sat at one end of the long table with his advisors. Jake, Zara, Dr. Park, and Commander Hayes sat at the other end. Translation devices had been set up to ensure clear communication. "I am High Arbiter Velkan of the Veltar Collective," the alien leader announced in a deep, musical voice. "I have come to resolve the bonding claim situation involving my daughter Zara and the human known as Jake Morrison." Commander Hayes stood up. "Your Excellence, I am Commander Ryan Hayes of the New Montana Colonial Defense Force. We welcome you to our world and hope we can resolve this misunderstanding peacefully." "Misunderstanding?" Velkan's violet eyes focused on Jake with an intensity that made him very uncomfortable. "Human Jake Morrison, did you or did you not offer my daughter your personal rest sanctuary during her time of need?" Jake stood up slowly. "Yes, sir, I did, but I was just trying to help her stay warm. I didn't know it meant anything special in your culture." "Ignorance of law does not excuse violation of law," one of Velkan's advisors said sternly. "The sanctuary sharing ritual creates binding obligations regardless of the participant's knowledge." Dr. Park cleared her throat. "Your Excellence, if I may explain, humans often help others without expecting anything in return. It's a fundamental part of our nature. Jake saw that Zara was cold and in danger, so he gave her his warmth shelter. There were no romantic or possessive intentions. Impossible, another advisor said. Assistance without contractual obligation does not exist in civilized societies. This human either sought to bond with our daughter or to claim ownership of her." Jake was getting frustrated. "I don't want to own anybody, and I wasn't trying to marry her. I was trying to keep her from dying of exposure. That's it." High Arbiter Velkan studied Jake's face carefully. "You claim your actions were motivated by what you call kindness. Yet you gained nothing from helping my daughter. You endangered yourself fighting the Krathos slavers. You shared your resources and received no payment. This behavior makes no logical sense." "Maybe not to you," Jake said, "but it makes perfect sense to me. She needed help and I helped her. End of story." The room fell silent. Velkan looked at his advisors, then at Zara, then back at Jake. Finally, he spoke. "I have traveled across the galaxy and dealt with hundreds of species. Never have I encountered beings who claim to help others without seeking advantage. You are either the most sophisticated liars in the universe, or you are something entirely new." "We prefer to think of ourselves as decent people," Commander Hayes said. "Decent people," Velkan repeated slowly. "This concept requires further investigation." 2 weeks after the diplomatic meeting, Jake found himself back in the mountains doing what he did best, studying rocks. But this time he was not alone. Zara walked beside him, carrying a pack filled with Veltar scientific equipment that could analyze mineral compositions in ways human technology could not match. "The crystal formations in this area are fascinating," Zara said as she scanned a rock outcropping with her alien device. "The molecular structure suggests they were formed under very specific pressure and temperature conditions." Jake smiled as he watched her work. After days of intensive cultural exchange meetings, Zara had decided to stay on New Montana as the first Veltar ambassador. Her father had finally accepted that humans really did help others without expecting anything in return, though he still seemed confused by the concept. "Your people have a saying," Zara continued as she took readings. "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. My father has decided that the Veltar Collective could benefit from learning this philosophy." "It's not really a philosophy," Jake said as he chipped a sample from a promising rock formation. "It's just being decent to people." "That is exactly what makes it so remarkable," Zara replied. "Most species in the galaxy operate on principles of advantage and exploitation. The Krathos enslave weaker beings. The Zentorian traders manipulate prices to maximize profit. Even my own people create complex social contracts for every interaction." Jake packed his rock sample into his collection bag. "So what happens now? Between our peoples, I mean." My father has proposed a formal alliance between humans and Veltar. We offer our advanced technology in exchange for learning your methods of cooperation and altruism. The Collective Council is very interested in societies that can function without constant competition and mistrust. They climbed higher up the mountain path, following a geological survey route that Jake had mapped months earlier. The work was peaceful and satisfying, very different from the excitement of first contact negotiations. "Jake," Zara said after they had worked in comfortable silence for a while, "I want to thank you again for what you did. Not just the sleeping bag, but everything. Fighting the slavers, protecting me, treating me as an equal when everyone else sees me as either a valuable prize or a dangerous alien." "You don't need to thank me," Jake said. "Like I told you before, we're friends. That's what friends do for each other." "Friends?" Zara repeated with a smile. "I am still learning this concept. In Veltar culture, we have family bonds, business partnerships, and social alliances. But friendship as humans understand it is something new." They reached a plateau that offered a spectacular view of the valley below. Jake could see the colonial settlement in the distance, and beyond that, the spaceport where both human and Veltar ships now landed regularly. In just 2 weeks, their two species had begun working together on joint research projects, cultural exchanges, and trade agreements. Dr. Park tells me that other alien species have been making contact since word spread. "About our alliance," Jake said as they set up their equipment for more detailed scanning. "Yes, the galactic community is very curious about humans. The idea of a species that practices genuine altruism is causing quite a stir. Several governments want to establish diplomatic relations with your colonies." Jake laughed. "All because I offered you a sleeping bag." "All because you showed kindness to a stranger," Zara corrected. "That simple act has changed the course of interstellar relations." As they worked together analyzing rock samples and sharing data between their different technologies, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed. A few weeks ago, he was a quiet surveyor who spent his days alone in the mountains. Now he was part of the first human-alien scientific collaboration in colonial history. "Zara, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever regret not going back to your home world? I mean, you could be living in comfort with your own people, instead of camping out in the wilderness with a rock collector." Zara paused in her scanning and looked at him seriously. "Jake Morrison, in my entire life, no one had ever put my welfare above their own interests, until I met you. My own people would have negotiated a contract before offering assistance. The slavers wanted to sell me for profit. Even the traders who might have helped would have demanded payment." She gestured toward the valley below where human and Veltar were working side by side. "But you gave me your sleeping bag simply because I was cold. You fought dangerous enemies simply because they threatened me. You treated me as a friend simply because I needed one. Why would I want to leave the first place I have ever felt truly welcome?" Jake felt embarrassed by her gratitude, but also proud of what their friendship had accomplished. "Well, if you're going to stay, we should probably get you some proper camping gear. That alien environmental suit is not designed for mountain hiking. I have already requested a sleeping bag like yours from the Colonial Supply Depot," Zara said with a grin, "though I made sure to specify that it was for personal use only, not for bonding ritual purposes." They both laughed at that. The cultural misunderstanding that had nearly caused a diplomatic incident was now a source of humor between them. As the sun began to set over the mountains, Jake and Zara packed up their equipment and started the hike back to base camp. Tomorrow, they would return to analyze their samples and plan the next phase of their geological survey. Next week, a joint human-Veltar mining operation would begin in the area they had mapped. "Jake, do you think other humans would have done what you did?" Zara asked as they walked. "If someone else had found me in that crashed pod, would they have helped?" Jake thought about his fellow colonists, the people he had grown up with, the values that had been instilled in him from childhood. "Yeah, I think so. Maybe not everyone would have handled it exactly the same way, but most humans would have tried to help. It's just how we are." "That is what gives me hope for the future," Zara said. "If kindness is truly a fundamental human characteristic, then perhaps other species can learn it too. Perhaps the galaxy can become a place where beings help each other instead of exploiting each other." They reached their camp as the stars appeared in the darkening sky. Jake built a fire while Zara set up their sleeping bags side by side, with proper spacing this time to avoid any more cultural misunderstandings. As they sat by the fire sharing rations and planning the next day's work, Jake realized that his simple act of kindness had grown into something much larger. The sleeping bag that had started everything was now displayed in the new Montana Colonial Museum as the artifact that started an alliance. But the real alliance was not between governments or species. It was between individuals who chose to trust each other, help each other, and treat each other with decency regardless of their differences. "Good night, Zara," Jake said as they settled into their respective sleeping bags. "Good night, my friend," Zara replied. Above them, human and Veltar ships passed silently through the star-filled sky, carrying goods and people between worlds that had once been strangers but were now partners. And it all began with one person offering warmth to another on a cold mountain night, expecting nothing in return except the knowledge that he had done the right thing.